Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today and spending your lunch with us for our fourth Newcomer Access to Housing Lunch and Learn. So like I mentioned, today's session is being recorded so that it can be shared with attendees afterwards, as well as posted to our website, as well as to our YouTube channel. And before we start, I'll pass it over to Jenny, one of our working group members and organizers of the Lunch and Learns, to do our land acknowledgement.
Hi, everyone. So I'll read out the land acknowledgement. This land has been the site of human activity since time immemorial and is the traditional territories of the Wendat, Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements and is home to many Indigenous nations from across Turtle Island, including the Inuit and the Métis. These treaties and other agreements, including the One Dish with One Spoon Wampa Belt Covenant, are agreements to peacefully share and care for the land and its resources. Other Indigenous nations, Europeans, and newcomers were invited into this covenant in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, newcomers in this generation or generations past. We are mindful of broken covenants, and we strive to make this right with the land and with each other. I would also like to acknowledge those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And so I honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. So also, as mentioned in past sessions of this Lunch and Learn series that centers housing, we think it's important to not only acknowledge and act in ways that honor Indigenous connections to this land, but that it's also important to understand and rectify the disproportionate impact that the housing crisis has on Indigenous peoples across this land that's been seized from these communities through colonization. I invite all of us here to keep this in mind at the forefront of our minds when we strategize and call for action around access to housing. Through the work that we do, we know that access to housing remains an increasingly urgent and complex issue for marginalized groups within the wider housing crisis. Among these marginalized groups are newcomers of varying status, so including those who are undocumented, and newcomers of different identities and circumstances. TSLIP's Newcomer Services Collaboration Working Group had identified newcomer access, or perhaps lack of access to housing, as an urgent issue of focus within the newcomer serving sector in our current work plan. In response, the working group has organized this Lunch and Learn webinar series designed for newcomer serving sector staff, so they may better help newcomers navigate and access the housing supports and resources, financial or otherwise, that are available to them. Today's session is the fourth in the series. And while the series is a small step and comes with its limitations with regards to impact, we heard from our partners that it would be a valuable resource if we centered each Lunch and Learn on programs and supports that are available for newcomers with different identities and circumstances. So today we have Maja Bryon from the Neighbourhood Information Post, who's joining us to present specifically on the Toronto Rent Bank program, of which she is the program coordinator at the Neighbourhood Information Post. And as usual, after the presentation, we'll have some time for Q&A, so feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go, or even during the Q&A period that we'll have. So thank you, Maja, for being here. I'll pass it over to you now so that you can introduce yourself and start your presentation.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you for that introduction. I'm really honored to be here and speak about the program that our agency is very passionate about. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maja Bryon, and I work for the nonprofit agency Neighbourhood Information Post. Neighbourhood Information Post is the nonprofit agency situated at the downtown East Core. I've been employed by Neighbourhood Information Post for the past 2 decades, and I've been in a role of the Rent Bank coordinator since 2009. So I will start sharing my screen, my presentation here that I have prepared. It's a short presentation that really outlines the basic general information and eligibility criteria for the program. So the Toronto Rent Bank program has been around, sorry, should I remove this? I'm not really sure what exactly, you do see the screen, right? Okay.
Yes, we do.
I think so, okay. The Toronto Rent Bank program has been around since 1999 and historically has been known as an interest-free loan program. So we were giving out interest-free loans until the program got converted into a grant program, and that happened at the beginning of the pandemic. So as it is right now, we are administering program as a grant program, which means really that the applicants who are receiving a short-term financial assistance from our program don't have to pay money back to the program. Okay, so I'll move on with a slide, sorry, number 2. So the purpose of the program is to prevent the homelessness, and really by giving short-term financial assistance to the households is really to help them improve their housing stability and maintain their housing. There are 2 major components of the program. One is to assist the low-income households who are in arrears. So we are giving them rental arrears grants to cover the arrears, to avert the eviction, to stay housed where they are. And then the second component to the program, it's where we give first and last month rent, which we refer to rental deposit grants. So for those who wish to move into more affordable or more suitable housing, they can apply for the first and last month rent. So practical clients can only apply for one part of the program at a time. I'm just gonna move on to the next slide. So the rental arrears grants are up to 3 months of rent or $4,000, whichever comes first or whichever is less, what we say. So if someone's rent is $1,000 a month, then, and let's say that household owes, let's say $5,000 to their landlord for the rent, then they can apply for $3,000, because that would be equivalent to 3 months of rent if the rent is $1,000. That means that we cannot cover more, and also that a cap of 4,000 will not be reached. So the cap of 4,000 can be reached and used in the terms of when the rent is higher. So for example, if the monthly rent is $1,450 and the client owes $5,000, then the cap for that grant would be $4,000. We would not be able to assist with the maximum of 3 months of rent. So it's a 3 months of rent or 4,000, whichever is less. So the clients have to be also in arrears for that amount. So if someone owes only 1 month rent, the client cannot apply for 3 months of rent. So the client has to be in a rental arrears to qualify. And as I mentioned, up to 3 months of rent or 4,000. For the first and last month rent grants, we assist, the grants are based really on the size of the unit. So for example, if someone is moving into a bachelor unit, the cap would be 1,500 times 2, as it's for the first and last month rent. For a 1 bedroom would be 1,700 times 2. For a 2 bedroom would be 1,900 times 2 grant. And for 3 bedroom or larger size unit, the maximum grant would be 2,100 times 2. Again, if someone is moving into a bachelor, it costs $1,000 a month, then the client would be applying for 1,000 times 2. It's just the cap is 1,500. So if someone is moving into a bachelor, it costs 1,700, then we would apply that cap of 1,500. The grant would be for $3,000 for the first and last month rent, and then that remainder has to be paid by the client. And if the client is really not in a position to make the payment in full, then we can try to make a repayment plan with the landlord. We can try to negotiate, mediate on client's behalf. That also the same process is in place. If someone owes more than 3 months of rent, applying for rental arrears grant, and owes more than what the rent bank or grant program can offer, we can try to step in and try to mediate a repayment plan between the landlord and the tenant. So that's basically very general information about two parts of the program. This is the general eligibility criteria for the rent bank program. So the clients have to be residing in the city of Toronto to qualify. For the clients who are moving in, the new tenancy has to be within the city of Toronto. So the postal code has to start with the letter M. So the client who is applying for the first and last month rent could be coming in from any other municipality, even country. As long as the new place is within the city of Toronto, then the client meets that residency criteria. And of course, for the clients who are already residing in the city and applying for rental arrears grants, the place has to be within the city of Toronto boundaries. The clients have to be of low income. So we're saying the household has to be determined as a low income household. I mean, the household income has to be within the guidelines of the rent bank income eligibility limits. So in general, the program is really promoted as the program for the low income tenants. We have a next slide will show the table that really outlines those actual numbers, the figures, what makes pretty much the income limits that really help us determine whether the household is of a low income or not. So the clients have to have a steady source of income. So if someone is, for example, looking, let's say, doing an odd job one time, is not considered a steady and ongoing source of income. So for example, if someone is shoveling the snow for a neighbor one time, but has no income, there is a high chance that that client will not qualify based on the income criteria. So the clients do have to have income to qualify. The clients on social assistance do not qualify. So the clients on social assistance, they can try to speak to their worker and apply for housing stabilization fund, right? So there is a additional funding through social services for the OW recipients and ODSP recipients. It's a grant as well. Those funds, they can be used for rental arrears, first and last month rent, moving expenses, utility expenses, so forth. But, the program is run by social services, so we always advise the clients to approach their social service worker and get proper information, and also whether, the eligibility information as well, because everyone's case is different. The clients have to be paying market rent to qualify. So if someone is paying subsidized rent, does not qualify to apply. The clients who are paying subsidized rent, they can approach a legal clinic, try to get assistance from the legal clinic in terms of, maybe being represented if in court, if the landlord takes them to the court, maybe before that stage, also the legal aid worker can help them negotiate with the landlord about the repayment plan, explain their situation, but a legal clinic will not be providing them a financial assistance. So that's not why they are being referred to the legal clinic. The clients who are paying subsidized rent, they can also speak to their housing providers, and see if they can pay a repayment plan, explain their situation. A lot of landlords, their understanding. And again, it really depends on the individual situation and circumstances of that household, depending, of course, if someone's been behind for a while, met multiple times and so forth. So all these factors will come in play when, when the tenant is trying to negotiate the repayment plan with the landlord. So that's why we refer them to the legal clinic as well. But just to point out, the clients who are receiving any type of housing allowance, right? So whether it's a housing allowance program or another one that started during the pandemic, I think it's called Ontario, some type of housing allowance. Not really sure the exact name. The clients who are receiving housing allowance, they do qualify. We do not consider that as to be a subsidy. A regular subsidy, for example, like what we see subsidized rent when it's paid 30% subsidized or rent geared to income, RGI rent. It's usually that we see with the Toronto community housing tenants and co-ops. But if someone is receiving a housing allowance, we do assist the clients who are receiving housing allowance. Just to point that out, we do not consider that as a regular subsidized rent. And then in order to qualify, the clients had to be covered under the current Residential Tenancy Act. Why we do that is really because if they're not covered under the RTA, the owners, they can just evict the tenants without going through the legal eviction steps. Which means that really, even if we were to assist someone, there is no guarantee that this person, that we will sustain this household's tenancy. And what we usually see, the clients who are like our common cases to say when the callers come to us, when they're not covered under the RTA, is really if someone is renting, sharing the kitchen or bathroom with a landlord, or if someone is subletting. So let's say they are subletting from the actual leaseholder. So those are two most common cases that we see that come to the rent bank, but they're not so, to say, they're not so frequent. It doesn't happen that often, but those are the most prominent ones. And you know, the rent bank checks are always payable to the landlord. So let's say, you know, if someone is subletting, there is a high chance that maybe a landlord is not aware that someone is actually staying there, other than a leaseholder. Sometimes the rent is even not owed to the landlord. So in that case, if we were to issue the funds to the landlord directly, it could be a situation that someone is not even in arrears because the leaseholder paid it, but still expecting the money from the person who is he subletting or she or they subletting to. That's a common one, that, you know, the landlord is not even in arrears. And then the second common one is really that the landlord is not even aware that, you know, the leaseholder is really renting out this unit. So that's basically general eligibility criteria for the rent bank program. This table represents income guidelines, and what we refer to as the rent bank income eligibility criteria. So the first column it really outlines the number, it shows the number of people residing in the household. And then the second column would be household's annual net income. So that would be after taxes. And then the third column is pretty much the same as the second one. It just translated to the monthly net income, what people bring home on a monthly basis. You will see that these numbers, if you were to compare them to any other numbers out there, that any other programs that they serve low-income tenants, you will see that our figures here, they're much more generous than any other programs really within the city that serves the low-income tenants, and they have income restrictions. So we also, on the top of this, we are more flexible. This is really not, these numbers, they're not really the final numbers. Some people could be even making more. So we could add actually another 10,000 if you look at the middle column. So that's annual income. We could add another 10,000 on top of that, and the clients would still qualify. This is when we apply the flexibility. We look at all the reasons why someone is behind with pretty high income. You know, depending how much the arrears are, why the rent is unpaid, how much the monthly rent is, that all comes into play when we're trying to determine the housing sustainability. So if you will, let's say, look at the middle column, if you were to add another 10,000, that would mean that, let's say, a single person's household, 56,500 net income. So this is after taxes. You know, with no taxes, about another 10,000 on top of it, if not more. So if you were to even to calculate what would be that equivalent to the monthly net income, that individual could be making more than 4,700 and still qualify. So if not even close to 5,000. So that's definitely, you know, be aware that this, you know, this is not only income that income criteria that really someone of the low income would fall into. This is really something that's really that applies to the moderate income earners as well. right? So, we usually don't promote it that way, but it definitely covers the moderate income earners, not only low income households. And these numbers, actually, the income limits, they were raised during the pandemic with the purpose of really us serving, larger population and having more people meet this income eligibility criteria. So the higher the numbers are, it's less restrictive program, and we have, more people applying and qualifying. Okay, so I will move on to the next slide, sorry. So this is our service delivery model. It consists of the central administration, which is neighborhood information post, and local service access centers, which we have 7 currently in the city. All other local service access centers, they're housing help centers. So my next slides, they will show the names of the housing help centers. But just to mention, we have a couple of offices in Etobicoke. We have North and South office. We have an office in North York, which is at Jane and Wilson. We have an office at just south of there, which is York area, not really York municipality, but York at Rogers Road and Kiel, which is Unison. South of that, we have West Legal, which is at Bloor and Dufferin. Then, as I mentioned, we have Neighborhood Information Post, and we have a TNO, which is at Thorncliffe or Flemington Park area. We have East York Agency, which is at Greenwood and Danforth. We have an agency in Scarborough as well. So these all local service access centers, they have intake staff on site. Those are the intake staff. They will work with our applicants, and they will do most of the work. And it's here mentioned local service access centers are responsible for intake and application, assessment of the applicant's situation, providing any supportive, any resources that will help the client stabilize their housing, improve their housing stability. So it's not only that they may need financial assistance toward the rent, for rental arrears or first and last month rent. They may need other resources as well, such as utilities assistance, trusteeship, food bank, furniture bank, legal clinic, and so forth. And the central administration of Neighborhood Information Post, we do have intake worker on site, and then we also deal with other issues of the program, such as rent payments, releasing the checks, delivering the checks to the landlords through mail or pickups. We also in charge of all kinds of meetings, really, that they're pertinent to the rent bank program. And as I mentioned before, all rent bank checks are always payable to the landlords. So something that is kind of important, because a lot of our applicants, they think that the checks will be payable to the clients. So that, let's say, sometimes landlords come to Neighborhood Information Post to pick up the check. We can also mail the checks to the landlords. Clients can come and pick up the checks. We can also mail the checks to their home, and they have to deliver the check to their landlord. Something that that was established during the pandemic is our rent bank call center. So the rent bank call center was established during the pandemic, which we've never had before. Before pandemic, we've had our flyer with all these local service access centers listed on our flyer, and then the clients were really approaching each center on their own. So now during the pandemic, we have established a call center with one centralized number. That number is showing on my last slide. I'll keep it at the end so that everyone can get that number. So all new applicants are really going through the call center. The number is 397-416-397-RENT. And then the pre-screening call center staff, they will do the quick screening. They will ask for very basic eligibility criteria. And for those clients who do pass the pre-screening, which means really they qualify to apply, their application will be sent over, or what we say, dispatched to the intake staff from one of these 7 local service access centers. We do have online portal. So it's all done through our web-based program. So it's really a matter of literally seconds or minutes how we do it. So everything is very quick. As I mentioned, applications are done on the phone. Okay, so that was not mentioned. So how it works, next step would be once that successful pre-screening is sent to the intake worker, the intake worker will take it from there, connect with the client and complete the actual intake over the phone. Most of the time now, for the past 2-3 years, we're doing most of the applications remotely, virtually and remotely, but some of these local service access centers, they do have staff return full-time to their office. We leave that really to their discretion and how they want to do it. But a lot of still rent-bank staff works remotely. So the documents can be received by email or fax. And then when the intake worker completes everything, confirms the information with the applicant's landlord, then the completed application will be submitted to the central administration, which is Neighborhood Information Post, and it will be reviewed by the coordinator. So this is already mentioned, the check delivery, they can be mailed, they can be picked up. And so here are the documents that we require from the applicants. We're asking them to see, we're asking from them to see the proof of identity for all members of the household. We also ask for the proof of income in the form of bank statement, pay stubs for all members of the household who do have active accounts. And we also asking for the proof of rental arrears, or if it's a first and last month rent, the proof of new tenancy. Let's say for the proof of rental arrears and new tenancy, this information can be, received directly from the landlord through email. So a lot of things can be done very quickly. Very quickly, we say our processing time is about 5 to 7 business days. Sometimes we do try to rush that process. If someone, let's say, has a sheriff's order, which is really the final stage in the eviction process, then we can also, we can speed up with the process. And, what's always very important is for the intake workers to speak to the landlord. And, a lot of landlords are understanding and they're willing to work with us. And a lot of landlords also know about the rent bank. A lot of clients who go, they're taken to the court at the court level, LTB. They also, they tell the tenants about the rent bank as well. Here's the list of the local service access centers, including Neighborhood Information Post. So as I mentioned before, we have a couple of offices in Etobicoke and so forth. So this is our current list, but there are some changes coming in very, very soon. As of January of 23, we're going to have new agencies joining this network of the local service access centers. So we will have 2, if not 4 new agencies coming on board very, very soon. So we will have more agencies, definitely one more in Scarborough, which is a really vast area. It's very high demand area, if not maybe another agency in Scarborough. Also, like our funders are, the City of Toronto, and they also focus to have on our team Black-led agencies and Indigenous agencies as well. So this is what we're expecting to have very soon. 2, if not 4 new agencies as of January of 23. Which means that, the clients will have access, hopefully we're going to be even processing the applications even quicker. There's very high demand on the program ever since, the program got converted to a grant program, and with just the general, economic situation and everything what's happening, during the pandemic, there is a very high need for the program. The clients, just to know, the clients can apply every 12 months. So it's from the time they apply, they receive the previous grant. So it's not based on the calendar year, it's really based on when they receive previous grants. So the clients can come back to reapply after 12 months from the time they received the previous grant. And this is the number for our call center. So most of the calls, I would say 99% of the applicants are, calling this number. We just also have, arrangement with the local service access center. So for example, if someone is approaching their center for assistance, let's say with a trusteeship or with housing or with the utilities or any, so if their staff is already doing application for any other program within their agency, we also allow local service access centers to do the applications internally. So as I said, most of the applications are going through the call center, but if someone is already approaching the local service access center for any other service within their agency, we are open to have those applications done internally. But still, what it means, really, our staff knows how to create those by using the same database. They will create the application. It just does not go to the call center, but it will still end up at the same place when the application is finalized, submitted. It still ends up, to be reviewed by the coordinator of the program. So I would say that this is really the basic general information about the program. And I don't know if there are any questions.
So thank you, Maja, for that presentation. There was a lot of information there. So we want to open it up for folks to have any questions. Please feel free to put it in the chat, or you can use the raise your hand function, or just unmute. We do already have one question in the chat, and it's from Jenny. And the question is, what is the turnaround time from applying to the landlord receiving the check?
So from the time, okay, so there's a first step in pre-screening, and because of the first step is the pre-screening, and then the successful pre-screening are especially the workers. Because of the high demand, before, when maybe a year ago, we had, let's say, the workers, intake workers, they had to pick up that application and connect with the client within 1 to 2 business days. Now it's been moved to 3 to 4 business days, just because there is very, very high number of applications coming in. So our staff is trying to do the best. And we are hoping, so pretty much from the time the caller calls the call center, and let's say the caller passes this pre-screening, which means the next step is to go to the intake worker. So the intake worker has this, time period within like up to 3 to 4 business days to call back the client and complete the intake. But of course, we know that a lot of our workers are trying their best, and this happens much earlier. But what we are telling the callers is really, please do not call us back if you did not receive that call and it's less than 4 business days, right? Because we're going to send you the same message, right? You have to still wait for the call, that worker. And then, so the workers, so let's say, there's an additional, we would say, it really depends, right? So let's say the intake is done on the 2nd day from the time that the caller called the call center. Let's say the worker connected pretty quickly, completed intake over the phone. So what now the worker is waiting is really for all these documents. So it really falls a lot on the applicant when it comes to submitting necessary documents. And really, that's the main reason why the applications are not processed. It's not because the worker is not, so if let's say through the email, the worker receives pay stub, bank statement, everything, and a lot of times, like, landlords are responsive. Landlords, they know about the rent bank, they know our funds are guaranteed. I mean, of course, if we were to let them know that everything seems fine and it looks like they're going to be getting, of course, they want that money. So everything can move very quickly, right? So this is why it's very hard to say. It really also depends a lot on the client's response time. I would say if everything is submitted the same day, we could finalize the application within 2 to 3 business days. A lot of times what we experience that, that it takes some time for the clients to submit everything that's necessary, or when they submit, let's say, partial information. So our workers would really, they do know that, whoever has access to the email, every applicant, not only telling them over the phone what we require, they would follow up with the email with the list of the documents so that nothing is missed. Right. And the moment these documents are really received, then the worker can, submit the application, and then whoever is reviewing application really can review, within the, I would say a day or two. We do have actually now few people just because of the growth of this program. It's not even one person now reviewing applications on our end at Neighborhood Information Post. We literally have like 3.5 now staff reviewing the applications beside doing some other duties. So this is how the program really grow. And how the demand is high, that we're having really high number of applicants. But, so it's hard to tell, we usually say 5 to 7 business days. But if, let's say, within those 7 business days, the worker did not even receive one document from a client, from the applicant, then, the worker would do follow-up emails asking them, to send it as soon as possible. So what we see really that clients, when they call the call center, it seems like a lot of cases are urgent. But when it's time to, for the clients to submit the necessary documents, this is where the process slows down.
Thank you for answering that question. We have a few more in the chat, 3 more. So maybe I'll just read them out and I'll reread them if need be. So the first one is, what is the best time to apply for the grants? Is it when individuals are already on rent arrears or before it happens? The second one is, are the LSACs catchment focused? And then the last one is, does the call center for pre-screening have interpretation available?
So the first question is, when do they apply, right? So they have to apply when they're behind on rent. So they don't qualify. So let's say today, December 7th, someone is anticipating not to be able to pay rent in January. The person does not qualify. So they have to be in rental arrears. So if they call the call center and they're not in rental arrears, they will not pass that pre-screening. For the first and last month rent deposit applicants, we can do it in advance. So we're not so much focused when someone is moving. Sometimes people even call when they moved. There is certain criteria around that. So let's say if someone moved December 1st, they can still apply, they still qualify. But if it's within those 30 days from the time they moved, they qualify. Someone may be moving in January, they do qualify to apply. So for the first and last month rent, it's a little bit different, right? So we can process applications in advance. Also, if someone is moving, let's say February 1st, we can still do it. So that would be really my answer for the first question. So just to remember, for the clients who are in rental arrears, they have to be behind on their rent payments. And even if they're sure, let's say if they're positive, they're not going to be able to pay rent. Let's say someone lost a job, waiting for EI, and they already know that their debt is accumulating. And even when they receive that first payment, they have to pay other things such as groceries, car payments, so forth, something that they cannot really put on a back burner or something delay, then they still do not qualify until January 1st. So a question about local service access centers, considering that, they do, we are saying really for the purpose of the rent bank program, we do not have catchment areas, even though we have multiple local service access centers, the agencies. The agencies themselves, because they also have different programs within the agencies, such as housing, energy, I'm not really sure, mail and message, so forth, they have really catchment area for their own agency for other programs. But our agreement with them is really that there is no catchment area. What we are trying to do is really balance. So if every agency is funded, let's say with one full-time intake worker for the rent bank, we're really trying to balance that workload among all the workers in the centers, because we don't want, let's say, we know the Scarborough is historically known as very high. First, it's a very vast area. It was historically only Scarborough Housing, that which is formerly known Scarborough Housing. Now it's called the Housing Hub Center, and they had a really huge area to cover. So we don't want, let's say, they're funded one intake worker to cover 50 applications a month, and the other area worker that also we have one full-time position that covers 5 applications. So this is what we are trying. We are trying to balance the number of applications among all intake workers, so that everyone performs at the same level. And not only that, if we were to dispatch 50 calls to one worker in Scarborough, that worker would not be able to perform properly, right? Because you have so much to do, and there would be some certain complaints about the worker not being available and so forth. So that's what we're trying to do, and especially with the new agency coming on board, we're going to send the same message. Some of the agencies will be close to each other, because if we were to get another 4 agencies, there's definitely that some of them will be really close to each other, and this is why we are trying to eliminate, and we've tried always, to say that there are no catchment areas. Sorry, there was one more question?
Yeah, and the last one is, does the call center for pre-screening have interpretation available?
So we do have, we try to accommodate the clients, right? Because we do also have very diverse staff, and that's actually listed even on the city's website. City is our funder for the program, and on their website is also listed the different languages that we are able to assist the clients. We have only 3-4 staff on the call center. But if they need assistance from someone speaking different language, we've actually collected that information from all our intake staff. So we have like another 15 workers beside the call center. So if someone, let's say, if the call center staff does not, and none of them speak Spanish, we do know who does from our intake staff. So they're ready really to step in and assist with the translation.
Great. Thank you so much, Maja. And I believe that's all the time that we have.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Just before we wrap up quickly here, I know we're at time, but I've shared a link to a very brief evaluation of our Lunch and Learn session today that will inform the work that we do in the new year around future sessions. This is really our only way of knowing if the work we're doing is the benefit to staff in the newcomer serving sector, such as yourselves. So if you could please complete the evaluation now before we end, while it's fresh in your minds, that would be really great. Greatly appreciated on behalf of our working group and planning committee. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today on your lunch. And Maja, it's essential for us as a sector that's working to support newcomers to know about what's out there in terms of programming. So thank you very much for bringing this presentation to us. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care.